Okay, so we were looking at the different steps involved in empirical research, and we said that first you have to develop some idea. But if you have an idea, it doesn't mean that you have a proposal. You will get many ideas, and you will have to evaluate these different ideas. And three criteria should be used: feasibility, whether you have the data available and the data is of a good quality. Second is relevance. And third is novelty. It should not be mere replication. So, one idea is, I think you should first start off with the feasibility issue and look and see whether the data is available or not. When you're looking at it, you have to identify what information you require initially. You have to frame the hypothesis, plan the analysis, and then evaluate whether the information is there. So, I would say that when you're looking at what data is there, you start from framing the hypothesis, you plan the analysis, how you propose to answer your or test your hypothesis, and then you try to find out what sort of data you will require. And you should also check how good is the data. Because remember that when you're doing your research, you have to answer two questions. The validity of your results will be questioned. Are you confident that your analysis supports your conclusion? And second is, can you generalize your results? Okay. So we looked at different an example in feasibility. Then we turn to the literature survey. Literature survey helps to establish what is the relevance of your research, or rather the novelty of your study. Are you contributing something? In what way are you contributing? And as I've said, that analytical part students can somehow muddle through, but literature survey is one area where they face a lot of problem. Even searching is not very easy, but still people can search and identify some works. In fact, I forgot to tell you, apart from search engines, what you should do is when you use the search engines, you will see that certain papers are referred. Okay. I mean, once you download the paper, read the paper, look at the references, look at their literature survey, and you will see that they are referring to certain papers, which out of them, some of them may be relevant to you. So go through the literature survey, identify those papers, and then download them. And you will often be able to identify what we call a mother paper or mother papers. So these mother papers are papers which started research in this area. So when you're doing the literature survey, you should have the mother papers, which may be a bit old, and then you should have the recent works. So if your literature survey comprises of papers uh, ranging from 2000 to 2010, I would say it's outdated research. The topic has lost interest, it's no longer of relevance. You're researching in an area which is outdated. Be careful. So ideally, your literature study should have some old papers which start the issue. It shows that you have really gone into the roots of the problem. Then it should have recent papers, papers in the last 10 years, papers in the last 5 years, to show that you also have an update knowledge of what has occurred in the field. Okay, so keep this in mind. This is very important. Once you have downloaded the material, you will have to sort it. So I've shown you how to use Excel to sort it. How you can sort it, the themes, that depends on your topic. I'm sure that all of you can do it once you get into the habit. So in the literature survey, you should be able to answer three questions. the summary of the main findings, limitation of existing studies, and what do we want to know, which will lead to the research question. I also suggested Mendeley and Zotero. Mendeley helps you to cite, but it also helps you to collaborate because you can store PDFs and you can mark comments. You can mark portions of the PDF. You can add comments and send it to your supervisor who can give you feedback on it. So Mendeley is useful not only in citations and references as a citation manager, but also in collaboration. You can in fact form groups and so on. I'm sure Zotero also has it. I've just not used Zotero. Okay, now we come to the sources of data. Okay, ultimately, literature survey, everything is important. But this is the area where you really have to show your acumen. So again, you can have different types of data. Primary data, you go to the field, collect it. Secondary data, which can be unit level data like the data which REACHA used. So data collected by a secondary organization based on a primary survey. So you have NFHS data, you have NSSO data, and so on. If you want to do research and finance, you have Provis and so on. You have aggregative, what I call aggregate data. Like for instance, you can go to the World Bank site and you can download data for countries. You can go to different ministry sites and download data for states, districts, perhaps even blocks. Okay, but the data is not for individual. Unit level data is for an individual or household. You can also conduct experiments, but as far as I've understood, none of you are going to conduct experiments, quasi-natural experiments. And you have qualitative data, focus group discussions, interviews, vignettes, and so forth. I think qualitative data is something that you will have to use, but this is not my area, so I'm not discussing qualitative data. Now, primary data. Okay. Now, tell me what comes first in research. Suppose you want to do a primary survey to collect your data. What will come first, analysis or data collection? Firoz?
Data collection.
Data collection.
Okay. So do all of you feel that data collection should be the first step?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Then I'm saying you're deep in trouble. You first have to do the analysis. Now, how can you do the analysis without data collection? See, I'm not saying that you actually get the results. But what you have to do is, before starting on a survey, you should already have a set of hypotheses and research questions. So, once you have these hypotheses and research questions, start preparing tables. What do you require? What is the table that you require in order to undertake your analysis? It will be a blank table. You won't have figures in it. But you should first note down that, okay, I want this table. I want to run this regression. I want to run this type of test. So you will not know, you should be able to say that I will run a t-test on hospitalization rates between residents in a slum and hospitalization rates in residents of a multi-story building. Okay. Once you have this hypothesis, now you will be able to, you know what data to collect exactly. Otherwise, the data that you collect will be useless. Once you come back from the field, you will start entering the data, you will start analyzing it, and you will see that your results are very bad, or some method is suggested. You will have to do an instrumental variable method, but you don't have an instrument. So you have to plan, okay, this is the regression. What method should I use? Okay, I want to use a instrument variable method, two-stage least square. So I need an instrument. What can be the instrument? Okay, this is the instrument. So I need a question which will identify the instrumental variable for me. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So never jump into the data collection. First, do the analysis using blank tables. After some time, when you become more expert, you need not write it down on a piece of paper. You will be able to do it mentally. In fact, some part will be automatic. But you're just starting research. Even Nimesh has already done a paper in MPhil. Shondipan also, I think, has done some research. You are still at the fledgling level. So in your case, I would strongly suggest do the analysis first, have all the tables ready. That will tell you, okay, this is the variable that I require. So when I'm framing the question, I will put in this question. So in the hypothetical example that I gave you, you will need a question on residential pattern. You will need a question, so that will help you to distinguish between slum dwellers and multi-storied buildings. You need another question on hospitalization rates. So you need a question on whether the person has been hospitalized. Okay, without doing this, if you just jump in, maybe you will forget that you will not collect data on residential patterns. So once you come back, you finish data collection, you start the analysis, and then you realize you need data on residents, and you don't have the data. You will come back and you find that there's a problem of endogeneity. So how do you solve it? You need an instrument. So keep that in mind, frame the questionnaire accordingly. Okay, so when you're designing the questionnaire, you should have completed the blank analysis. You know what method you are going to apply. You know your hypothesis. You know the descriptive analysis. You know the econometric analysis and the method. So now you collect data in such a fashion that you have the data with you. Also, one important fact, when you're asked what method are you using to collect data, we always say it's a random sample. I've never seen a non-random sample in my life. But let me give a very famous example. In, I think, 1970s, there was a poll to determine, there was the US elections, and there was a poll to find out who would be elected as the president of United States. What happened, the way that the poll was conducted was like this. The investigators went to the polling station, went to petrol pumps, and when a car came up, it took some time to get the petrol. They had to wait in a queue. The petrol was being filled up. So in this 5 minutes, they were asked 2 or 3 questions. What is your name? What is your occupation? Education? Not name, of course. Education, income, etc., and whom are you going to vote for. When the data was analyzed, it was found that the Republicans were going to sweep the elections. All of them had said, 90% had said that we are going to vote for the Republican candidate. When the results came out, it was found that the Democrats had won and won comfortably. Can you explain why the anomaly? I mean, one reason can be that the people had lied, but let us assume that they had told the truth. Do you think that the sample was drawn randomly?
No.
Why?
Just the person came to me, I asked them. This was not a sampling.
Convenient, like
No, you're standing in a petrol pump, and the person, whoever person came to the petrol pump, do you know who will come to the petrol pump?
No.
So, in that sense, isn't it random?
No.
But sir, if it is in a specific place where the people
No, it was in
who
different parts. The petrol pumps, it was not one petrol pump. It was
okay,
petrol pump in different states. In each of the states, you had different locations. So, for example, if it was India, you would have surveys in Calcutta. Within Calcutta, you would have a randomly chosen set of petrol pumps. Outside Calcutta, but within West Bengal, you randomly select 10 cities and you choose a petrol pump over there randomly. And similarly in other states.
Sir,
Yes,
sir, in that case, I think like they are asking questions only to some particular section of people, like for example, drivers or those who are driving. Okay, so they might, so those who are drivers or those who are driving, they might be favoring the Republicans because of
exactly. Very good.
certain policies. So
Yeah.
in that
See,
case,
the Republicans are generally more popular among the high income people, relatively high income people in United States. And these people are more likely to have cars. So there was an inherent flaw in the sampling design. It was non-random. You were more likely to select a Republican candidate, sorry, a Republican supporter than a Democrat supporter. So be very careful of the sampling design. It is best if you what you should do is first you should ideally estimate the appropriate sample size. This problem is called power of test. I'm not an expert in this, so I won't elaborate on this. But it's possible to identify what should be the optimal sample size for testing your hypothesis. And the number of sample size is not really very. It, I mean, don't think that it's going to be a huge sum. I mean, we did a survey, and we were planning a survey of schools, and we found that we had to survey. Let's see how many. We had planned for a survey of 26 schools, I think, and the plan. That was a plan, and the optimal size after doing power of the test came to 28. So it's not that if you do the power, calculate the power of a test, you're going to get a large sum. So once you determine the sample size, I would suggest, but if it's not possible, you can't do it. And if it throws you up a very large value, you can't do it. The second part is once you have decided on the sample size, choose what is known as the recruitment criteria carefully. Okay. So recruitment criteria defines that who are you what is the subsection from which you're going to draw the sample from. The next part is household listing. See, generally you're going to do the survey in a particular area or 3-4 areas. You at this level you are not going to do an all India survey. So once you go to the area, you can find out lists of households or do it yourself. These are the eligible households. Then randomly choose. Random doesn't mean you go for a random number. You can just, there are very simple rules. You take out a currency note from your pocket. I'm sure that you are going to carry money with you. And you look at the last digit in this currency. If it's 7, choose every 7th household. If it is 3, choose every 3 household. And don't go in a straight manner, turn. So you go 3, suppose you have found 3, you go down in a straight line to the 3rd household, survey, turn right, take the 3rd household, again turn right, and go on like this. Okay, sorry, don't go always right, because in that case you're going to return to the origin point. Use a right-left combination. That is called serpentine sampling. Okay, so there are very simple rules which can help you to get a random sample. Nowadays, ethical clearance is becoming very important in research. Do go for an ethical board clearance. When you are going to publish, people are going to ask you whether you have got the necessary ethical clearance or not. In my case, we submitted a recent paper and it was returned twice. I had clearly written that we had got ethical clearance. It was still returned because the language that I had used was ethical clearance was sought from. So they said was obtained from. They said no, obtained from will not do. You'll have to clearly say that they gave you ethical clearance. Fine, I wrote that. Then they again send me a set of questions. So ethics is going to be very important in your research. Recruitment criteria, sampling I've already covered. Weights, again, if you're doing primary survey, weights are not very useful. This is mainly in the connection of unit level data. Data like NSSO, data like NFHS has weights. Weights are used in order to correct for oversampling of certain sections. Should you use them or not? What type of weights? For instance, data will tell you, will allow you to use 3 types of weights. Frequency weight, probability weights, and there's an inverse probability, I think. Analytical weights. So which type you should use depends on your particular research question. So I'll not discuss this, and it's a very controversial and long-run issue. But you should keep this in mind. And when you're explaining your method, you should clearly explain that, okay, I'm using weights. What type of weight am I using? Okay, so if you use a different type, if you don't use weights, if you use a different method than I normally use, it doesn't matter. Your research will not be invalid. But you should explain it. Focus on the definitions and coding. Okay. In Richa's seminar, you realize that there was a questioning about what she meant by intimate partner violence. Okay, now we had looked at the definitions yesterday. So we were very confident what the answer would be. We had looked at the standard definition. The definition that she had quoted was from CDC, which works on women violence. She had also checked the NFHS questioning. So that's also very clear. The problem was that NFHS and the CDC questioning does not match. So it means that we should be That led to the suggestion that we have to, when we are writing the limitations, we have to point out this fact. Okay. So you have to be very careful about the definition. And if possible, you should state the definition in your thesis. It may not be possible in the journal publication because of word limit, but do mention it in your main work. Coding is also important. Be careful of the coding. I mean, I remember we got completely results which are completely opposite to our hypothesis, and we couldn't understand what they were. Then we looked and saw that the coding was wrong. We had coded 1, 2, 3. 3 means better, but we had thought that 1 was better. So you have to look at the code. If necessary, you will find that the frequency of some of the codes or some of the categories are too little. You will have to combine them. For instance, when we were doing some work on COVID, we wanted to see whether there has been an improvement during COVID times. Obviously, the frequency is very low. So it is better to combine this with same. So although we have 3 categories, deterioration, same, improve, when doing the analysis, it is better to club it as deterioration and same and improve. 2 categories. So which categories, how you should merge, what type, it depends on your data, but keep this in mind. But you should also realize that you can't club dissimilar categories. For instance, you cannot club deterioration with improvement. You can only club deterioration and same, or same and improve. Okay, so adjacent categories can be clubbed. Be very careful about missing data. Does your data set have missing data? I mean, I've seen a paper in which the woman, the survey was done, income data was collected. Some people refused to reveal their income. And so the researcher, by the way, it's a faculty, not of our department, but of a university. The faculty had said that, okay, in that case, put 0 in case of data, income. Now, who do you think does not reveal data? Poor person or rich person? Who is more likely not to reveal data?
Rich.
Okay. So let us say you have 5 persons. Okay. You have ranked them according to income. 1 is the lowest person, poorest person, 5 is the richest person. Okay. Now, 4 and 3 says refuses to reveal the income. So now what is the new ranking? If you put them as 0, the ranking will be 4, 5. They are the poorest. Then 1, 2, 3. Your ranking is in a mess, right?
Yes, sir.
So when you run the regression, you are going to get very odd results. You might get completely opposite results to what you're expecting, or it might become insignificant. Do you understand what I've said? By the way. So if you have missing data, treat it as missing, but don't put 0 in it. Drop the variable. When you create variables, particularly in unit level data, or when you're working with a derived data set, or even if you're working with your own data set, remember to keep the definitions with you. You will forget. See, we had to calculate a lot of per capita expenditure in different using price index and so on. I did it 2 months ago and I've forgotten how I've done it. But I knew that I would forget, so I kept a detailed record of the different steps. So when I'm sitting down to write the paper, I just had a look at the note and I was able to write it down. So remember that your data, your research is going to take a long time, and you'd better keep a record of all these. Okay. When you have the data, whether it is secondary or whatever, you're going to have a lot of missing data, inconsistent data. The data in a current form may not be usable. So you'll have to, the first thing is don't start the analysis again. Have a look at the data. How many are missing? Are there any inconsistent data? Does some data have to be recoded? So you have a data on, let us say, education, and the number of graduates is only 1%. So don't keep graduate as a category. Club it with higher secondary. Try to understand the data. Is it continuous? Is it binary? Is it categorical? What implication does it make? I mean, I've seen a thesis in which all the variables were treated as continuous. So we had education as different categories. They should have been treated. So you had no education up to primary, class 6 to class 8, secondary, HS, and it was simply treated as a continuous variable. That will again give you wrong results. There are ways in which you have to treat categorical variables. I hope you understand what is meant by continuous, binary, and categorical.
Yes, sir.
What is the difference between what is a categorical variable?
Sir, suppose yes, no, or suppose the ranking, or suppose
Yes, no is binary.
yes, sir. Yes, no is binary. Suppose movie rating. If we rate the movie for 5 stars, we can count 1 star, 2 star. I think. Or sir, class 5, class 10, um, class secondary,
Okay, so education
graduate.
levels. So
Yes, sir.
so binary, categorical are almost the same, but in binary you've got two groups. So the basic difference is uh, what are the different groups in the variable? What are the different values of the data or variable? If the variable can take two values, it is treated as binary. If it has a fixed number, 5, 6, something like that, limited number, categorical, and if it is got a very large range, then it is continuous. 0. 0.1, 7.1, 7.2, 8, 9, 10, like this. Now, categorical data can be of two types. They can be ordered, like the example that you gave, education, or you can have what we say pure category, where it's not ordered. Okay. So, like if I ask you what is your favorite color, yellow, green, or blue? So, these are categories. Okay. You cannot say the yellow is better than green or green is better than whatever. But in case of continuous, for instance, you can order them. Okay. One is greater than 0, 2 is greater than 1, and so on. Achha, now suppose you have educational levels. Okay, you have no education, primary education, and they are ranked as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you say that they are continuous?
No, sir.
What is the difference?
So in case if you are giving the value 1 to no education
Yeah.
and then rest, so then that is simply coding, I think. Like we are giving
Yes, it's coding. Yes. Okay, suppose I've got data on years of education, and I've got data on, I've clubbed the data into 0 to no education, class 1 to class 5. What is the difference between these two?
So first one is
Both
continuous.
of them are ordered. Both of them are ordered, right? You have a ranking. Higher value means you're more educated. But what is the difference between them?
So 0 to 5 or 5 to 10. This is
Sorry,
the
just
sir.
one second, please. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, বলো ফিরোজ। হ্যাঁ বলো ফিরোজ।
The first one is continuous and second one is categorical.
What is the difference? Yeah, it is categorical, but you are getting a ranking in both. What is the difference in the nature of ranking? In a quantitative analysis, we do not treat both the variables similarly. Why?
তো বুঝতে পারছি না।
সন্দীপন?
স্যার প্রথমটা মানে 0 টু 5 বা 5 টু 10 যেটা আছে এটা আমার মনে হয় কন্টিনিউয়াস। আর এমনি যেটা আছে মানে 5 দুটোই র্যাঙ্কিং, বাট একটা মানে ফার্স্ট কেসটায় রিলেশন আছে, মানে আমি ডেটাটা চলতে থাকছে আর কি, এটা আমার মনে হয় আর কি। ঠিক বুঝতে মানে
কন্টিনিউয়াস এখানে মনে হয় না আসবে বলে, আমার মনে হচ্ছে ক্যাটাগরিক্যালির মধ্যেই থাকবে দুটোই, কিংবা
ঠিক আছে,
মেবি
আমি জাস্ট
বাইনারি।
তোমাকে একটা দেখাচ্ছি। একটা হচ্ছে ইয়ার্স অফ এডুকেশন, ঠিক আছে? তাহলে 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9। আর এখানে এটাকে আমি বললাম নো এডুকেশন, এটাকে আমি বললাম প্রাইমারি ও বিলো প্রাইমারি, এইটাকে আমি বললাম মিডল, ঠিক আছে? করে এটাকে আমি একটা কোড দিলাম 3, এটাকে কোড দিলাম 2, এটাকে কোড দিলাম 1। হ্যাঁ, এবার একটু বলো।
ক্যাটাগরিক্যাল লাগছে।
হ্যাঁ, ক্যাটেগরি তো লাগছে, কিন্তু এই যে এইখানে যে 1, 2, 3 আর প্রথম কলামে যে 1, 2, 3, এদের মধ্যে ডিফারেন্সটা কি? ইউ আর গেটিং নাম্বারস, অ্যান্ড হায়ার নাম্বারস ইজ বেটার, ইজন্ট ইট?
Yes, sir.
What is the difference in the numbers?
So I think in the first case, years of education, like if the years are increasing, so that's good. So, but in the second case, we are just grouping the in
Yeah, but yeah,
group the like classes. Okay,
but
classes.
if you're increasing, that's also good, isn't it?
Yes.
ডেফিনেটলি স্যার।
Okay, tell me that suppose a person has 2 years of education and another person has 1 years of education. Can we say that he has more knowledge theoretically?
ইয়েস স্যার।
How much knowledge? Twice as more knowledge? Or better still, let's take a very non-controversial means income, let us say. Okay. So let us say this is 1000, this is 2000. Or let us make this 1000, let us make it 1000. Fine. So all these are 3000, 4000 like this. Okay, so one is, this is below 1000. What is this? This is 1000 to 5000, and this is above 5000. Can we say that 2000 is twice as much as this? Two
That
thousand is
will be more
twice.
clear.
No. 2000 is double that of 1000. Can we say this?
Yes.
He has got
Yes,
twice.
sir.
Is twice more rich. 3000 is 3 times more rich than this person.
Yes, sir.
Okay, this person and this person, 6 times more rich, right? In here, can we see that these people are twice as much rich as this person? This is 2, this is 1.
No.
No, sir. No, sir.
Here, can we say this is thrice as much rich as this person?
No, sir.
So in both cases, we have a ranking, but what type of ranking is this? It's taught in your microeconomics, Marshallian theory.
Trans, trans,
This is called a cardinal ranking. And this is called ordinal ranking. Okay, cardinal means that the numbers have a meaning. Okay, they actually represent the index values. So 2000 is twice as good as 1000. 2000 is 4 times better than 500. You can compare like this. But in case of these categories, even though you have an order, you can only say 2 is better than 1. 3 is better than 2 and 1. You cannot say how much better. In case of a cardinal ranking, you can say exactly how much better you are. And in this case, let me give an example. In this case, it's just a descriptive category. You can't say that 1 is better or worse than 2 or 3. The numbers that you are using are just descriptive. They don't have any ordering in this. Okay, so you have to be a bit careful what the variable is. This is a continuous. In case of continuous variables, you have a cardinal ranking. Okay. In case of income levels, not income levels, in this case, these are categorical. Here you have an ordinal ranking. You are only able to say which is better, which is worse, not how much. And here, these are descriptive categories which do not have any connotation about which is better, which is worse. So when you're using these three types of variables in your analysis, we treat them in a regression in different ways. Okay. Continuous, you can just add the variable. Income level, categories like this, you have to include them in a particular way by introducing dummies. Unordered categories, yeah, the treatment is the same, but interpretation is a slightly different. Okay, got the point?
Yes, sir.
So it's very mundane, but do go through the data. Try to see how it is ordered. The first thing you should do is check the data set you have, check the variables that you have. Okay. If you have secondary level data, that you have data on countries, look at the definitions, sources. I mean, this will be very important to, I think, Firoz. Where are you downloading the data from? What is the definition of the data that they're using? Because remember, in this case, you have to follow the definition. You can't change it. You can't say, I need this type of data. You have data on the website, you either have to use it or give up your research.
Yes, sir.
Is there any missing data? If the data has too many missing data, throw it out. Or understand why is it missing. Maybe a new block has been created. So how do you treat this? So these are the different ways in which you have to do the analysis. Again, in this case, you can have two types of problem. In one case, what we had was, you can either see, suppose you have in the 2011 census, you had 641 districts. Now you have more than 700. So if you're doing the data for now, you're going to get data for 700 districts. Therefore, what you should do is, you should, if you want to use 640 districts, you should combine the data for the districts. So if a district has been bifurcated, you should now combine the data for the two districts which have been bifurcated. This is possible only if you have raw data. If you have rates data, then you can't do this. If you have the number of institutional delivery in two blocks, you can simply add them and get the total number of institutional delivery in the original block. But if you have the rate of institutional delivery, what percentage of deliveries were in institutions, you can't add the data. You have to keep it separate. In that case, a better strategy would be, you go back to the old data and split it up into two blocks. Make it half or something. But do whatever you want. Explain it. So one way is merging, the other is breaking up. But you have to identify why data is missing. Because if data is missing, your degrees of freedom goes down. Now, you already have an objective, you have research questions, hypothesis. When you're framing the hypothesis, there's a very important principle which was laid down by Popper, which is the principle of falsifiability. Popper said that science is something, a scientific statement is being capable of being proved wrong. So if I say that a sun rises in the east and sets in the west, we can test this. We can get up in the morning every day and check whether it is really rising in the east, and we can come out and test, see whether it is setting in the west. And if we find a single day in which this is not happening, my statement is wrong. On the other hand, if I say that I like this boy very much, can this be tested? This cannot be tested because it's something which is very personal to me. So this is not a personal statement. Okay, falsifiability is very important in social science research. Your hypothesis should be capable of being tested and proved wrong. If it can be tested, then only you have a operational hypothesis. So do you understand falsifiability? Or is it not very clear?
So not very clear.
Okay, what I'm saying is that you're making a statement. Okay. Can I prove this to be wrong? Can I prove this to be false? Okay, if it is a scientific statement, like as I've told you, the sun sets in the west, you can test this. And when you test this, the statement is either proved to be correct or it is proved to be wrong. You set something on the gas stove, and after 5 minutes, you see that this is very hot. Is it falsifiable statement? So if I show you something and say that this is very hot, do you think that this is falsifiable?
No, sir.
Why?
How can
Sir,
I
it
test?
can be tested.
Yes, you can. If you're very foolish, you can touch it. But if you're clever, you will just use a thermometer or something and measure the temperature of the article. So in this way, you can find out that what the temperature is, and so whether it is hot or cold. If I say that, okay, you are a very tall person, your height is above 6 foot, is it falsifiable? Or your height is below 6 foot, is it falsifiable? Yes, I just take you over there. I take something to measure, and I measure it. I find out your height. And so, if it is above 6 foot, the statement is wrong. If you are below 6 foot, my statement is correct. Okay? If I do it tomorrow, will the results change?
No.
So, this is a statement which is falsifiable. You can test it and prove it to be right or wrong. But statements like, as I've told you, I like this boy, but it's a very beautiful scene. These are personal. You can't really test this. And I may like it today. Tomorrow, my feeling may be different. I may not like that person. Someone else may not feel that a person is a good person or the scenario is very beautiful. So, there are no ways of testing the hypothesis. So, in social science research, you have to frame your hypothesis in such a manner that you can use statistical methods to test whether your hypothesis is true or not. Now, methods, descriptive statistics are very commonly used. Don't belittle them. They are the first step in analysis. They help you to get a perspective or an overall feel of the data. And it can also sometimes help you to frame new questions. See, I've already I started by focusing on that you should do the analysis, plan out everything before starting on the actual process of research, data collection, etc. But research is also evolutionary. That is, when you're doing the research, your results will throw up new questions and ideas. And you should be able to follow through some of these questions. You won't be able to follow through all the questions, but at least some of them. So, for this, to stimulate the new or identify the new questions, often descriptive statistics is very useful. You will observe a new relation which you have not noticed before. So, when you do the econometric analysis, you will want to test this and see whether it holds up. In econometric analysis, again, you have very new exciting methods coming up: random forests, neural networks, artificial intelligence, machine learnings. As opposed to this, you have the traditional methods: OLS, Logit, Probit. These traditional methods are not very attractive. If you get up and say that, look, I've done a random forest, people will look and say, wow, random forest. Someone else Shrundipon get up and says, I have done neural networks. Everyone will turn and look at him. But traditional methods often help you to get to the core of the problem. See, I had attended a course on which dealt with random forest neural networks. And the first thing that they said was, these are high tech methods. But you will often find that using a simple logit model will give you better results. In that case, don't go to random forest. Interpreting, measurement, these becomes much more easier in traditional methods. But new methods are a contribution. They sometimes simplify analysis, they throw new light. So you have to really understand that when you should stick to the old methods, when you should go to the new methods of analysis. Okay. For instance, Chamberlain in the 1990s wrote a paper on wage discrimination. And the problem that he was looking at was you had wage as a dependent variable, and you had union membership, whether the person belonged to a trade union or not, as one of the explanatory variables. And he had education, age, and so on. And when he regressed the model, he found that union membership had a positive coefficient, which was also significant. So, what does it imply, Shomo? Shomo?
Yes, sir.
What does it imply?
এটা ঠিক
Did you get
বুঝলাম
my
না।
question?
আরেকবার বলুন, আমি বুঝলাম না ঠিক এই ব্যাপারটা।
একটা চেম্বারলেন একটা রিগ্রেশন রান করলো যেখানে ও ওয়েজেস কে রিগ্রেস করলো অন ইউনিয়ন মেম্বারশিপ। ঠিক আছে? He got the coefficient to be positive and significant. So I've got now two questions to ask you. What is the coefficient? আমি কার কোএফিসিয়েন্টের কথা বলছি, ওয়েজ না ইউনিয়ন মেম্বারশিপ? And secondly, how to interpret this?
ইউনিয়ন মেম্বারশিপের কি হবে ওই?
And what is the interpretation of a positive significant coefficient?
এটা ঠিক সিগনিফিকেন্সটা বলতে পারছি না।
Okay, Nimesh?
Yes, sir. Sir, uh,
Yes.
the interpretation, matlab, as per me, I think that when we are like holding the other variables constant
Yeah.
on the average,
Hmm.
if if union membership, uh, if the person is they involved in the union,
Yes.
he's if the member is takes a membership in the union, then the impact on the wages can be showed by this thing, the coefficient, and since it is positive, so it implies that there is a direct impact. Like if a person gets enrolled in the way this the membership, then he will get higher wages because
Very good.
maybe correct
Whatever
what.
reason, whatever reason.
অ্যাকচুয়ালি
Yeah.
যত
So
ওয়ে
a union member typically earns higher wages, right?
ইউনিয়নটা স্ট্রং যত হবে তত হায়ার ওয়েজেস
Yes, sir.
পাবে।
Okay. Then Chamberlain, this was the starting point of Chamberlain's paper. Then what he did was he ran a quantile regression. And based on the quantile regression, he showed that in case of low income workers, being a union member had a greater impact. So the wage gap between a union member and a non-member was very high for low income workers. And if you went up, uh, the strength declined. So the wage gap declined between union and between member and non-member. The wage gap was not that high, and I think that in the last quantile, it even became negative. So that if you are a union member, you are going to get less wages. Okay, so here Chamberlain was using a completely new method. Remember, quantile regressions had come only in the 1980s. Although the origin was in the 1750s, they were being rediscovered only in the 1880s by papers by Bassett and Coink. So Chamberlain used a new method to show that the relation between union membership and wage changes depending on the quality of the worker. So here, using a new method throws new light on existing results. Here, the use of new methods was justified. But if you use if Chamberlain, for instance, got the same coefficient for all quantiles, then there would have been no justification for using the new methods. Okay, so you have to really choose between whether to use traditional and new methods carefully. It depends on the problems, it depends on the results. So be careful.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, like what the distinction that you said about the traditional methods and the new methods. Sir, can the new methods be used to check the robustness of our results in that sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you.
But at the same time, if you find that they are robust,
Yes, sir.
I don't think there's much use in using. Don't go for the new method. Only if the old method is non-robust,
Yes, sir.
you should report the new methods.
Okay. So
See,
because
there's a lot of background research also. You do some analysis, but you need not report it always.
okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
what you were saying something? I
Yeah,
interrupted you.
like sir, in some of the papers which I'm referring to, sir, they have there the in the methodology part particularly, there like some of the authors have done the sensitivity analysis, like they wanted to check the robustness of the results. So in that context, I asked you like whether for the traditional method, can we use the new methods to check its robustness or not?
No, in that case, the robustness analysis you're saying
Yes, sir.
is slightly different. See, when we uh, often we make some assumptions. Okay, so we put in some parametric value.
Okay.
So we estimate a model. I'm just giving an example. Okay,
Yes. Yes, sir.
so we have a Cobb Douglas production function, and we know that we have returns to scale,
Yes, sir.
but we don't know whether it is increasing, constant, or decreasing. Okay, so what we do is we run the model for increasing, we run it for constant, we run it for decreasing.
Okay.
This, and then we check the results to see whether the result is changing. This
Oh,
is sensitivity analysis. You change the parameters. Alpha plus beta greater than 1, equal to 1, less than 1.
yes, sir.
So the results, the parameters are changed. If the
Yep.
results also change, then it's not robust.
Okay. Okay.
But if it changes slightly,
Yes, sir.
it's fine. It doesn't make a major difference.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Descriptive statistics, mean, median, you have to be a bit careful. Graphical analysis. Graph looks very attractive, but remember, graphs take a lot of space. When you're doing the thesis, give graphs. I mean, you have to read a lot. It's about 200 pages, at least 150 pages. It gets very monotonous. So, breaking the monotony is good. But when you're publishing in a journal, you may have to pay for colored graphs. And secondly, you have word limits. I mean, the journal where we are planning to send research paper has a 30-page limit. So if I give a graph, it's going to occupy a lot of space. So I have to be very careful whether to give a graph or not. If I'm just representing, showing that something like I want to see the prevalence of smoking among boys and girls, should I give it in a graph or text?
So in graphical analysis would be better in that case.
No, it's very simple. You just, what is the
Give the
information that you need? 40% of boys smoke, 30% of girls smoke.
Yes.
One line will do. If you give a graph, what is the space that it takes? Huge.
Yes, sir.
About 7 or 8 lines. So if the graph is very simple, don't use graphs. But suppose you have, let us say, institutional delivery over a period of 20 years. What will you do?
I'll give a graph.
You'll have to give a graph. You can't write it was 15.6 in 91, it rose to 16.1 in 92, it fell to 15.9 in 93. You have to use a graph. But when you're using the graph, be very careful. People often give bar graphs for this. But what is the correct graph for this?
A line diagram.
Line.
Line diagram. Okay. Suppose you have data for states, different states of India in a particular year. What will you do?
Bar diagram.
Bar diagram. Bar diagram is an option. But in bar diagram, even better than bar diagram is to simply draw a choropleth map, like what Richard drew. You can identify which of the states have got higher values and whether they are located side by side, whether you have any clustering, a zone, similar zone or not. But what is the problem or limitation of the maps?
So it doesn't tell the specific values.
Yeah, you're clubbing the values. So can you tell me which is the state with the highest, uh, whatever you are studying, or which is the state which has the lowest one? You can't. So again it depends. So what you can do is you give the map and you can write a few lines saying that okay, these are the states with very high values, these are the states with very low values. And you can give the graph or you can give the table in the appendix. Okay, so it becomes very readable. And if someone wants to really know the details, they can always check the appendix. Okay. The next thing that something that I wanted to say over here. Oh, yeah. Acha, suppose I'm asking which state has the highest. I mean, suppose you're studying crime rates. Okay. And obviously, a state with a very high value is bad. So I have seen analysis which says that Goa, Manipur, Nagaland, these have the highest crime rates. See, people are not interested in the small states. It's a very small area. You have to focus on the main parts, the larger states. States like what is happening in Kerala, Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, not in a union territory, not what is happening in Andaman Nicobar Islands, not what is happening in Lakshadweep. They are always going to be outliers. So when you are interpreting the table, focus on the major states, not on the union territories. Okay, see that among the major states, crime rates are highest in these states, lowest in these states. Don't look at the actual table and say, okay, these are the highest and these are the lowest. The results that you get may be accurate, but they are not relevant. Okay. Okay, you have univariate test, bivariate test, something about graphs. Look at this map. This is a classic map. It was Charles Minard's graph of Napoleon's campaign of Russia. In one page, he sums up the entire campaign, the march of Napoleon Bonaparte, his attack of Russia, and his retreat. This page, this slide contains all necessary information. It tells you what happened to the army, the reasons for the why Napoleon failed. Everything is given over here. All the relevant information is given over here. You just have to look at it carefully. You know, by the way, do you know the Napoleon's invasion of Russia? What happened? Do any of you know what happened during Napoleon's invasion?
No, sir.
No, sir.
See, what happened was Napoleon uh, decided to attack Russia, and very foolishly he attacked Russia. He built up a huge army. It was one of the largest armies that the world had ever seen. The size of the army can be seen from the length of this green bar. So you can see over here, it has marched in Kovno. After crossing Kovno, he has sent 20,000 soldiers over here, 40,000 near Vilna. Okay, 60,000 over here, 30,000 over here. So you can see that he's keeping soldiers over here to guard his retreat. So the width is decreasing. Okay. You can see the different important landmark cities: Smolensk, Dorogobos, and finally Moscow. When he reaches Moscow, how many soldiers does he have? 1 lakh. This is the Grand Army. He started with 4,22,000 soldiers. So these are in between. The yellow shows his retreat. He is returning over here, and you can see he starts off with 1 lakh, 96,000, 87,000, 55,000. Now what is happening? Is he keeping soldiers over here? No, he's losing soldiers over here. So 9687 means 11,000 soldiers, 9,000 soldiers have died. Can you tell me why they have died? Look at the bottom of the chart.
Because of the temperature.
Temperature. Cold.
When he reached Moscow, he had planned to make Moscow his winter quarters. When he reached Moscow, or rather before he reached Moscow, what had happened was his old general, Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, had advised the Tsar on how to defend Russia against Napoleon. They had followed what is known as a scorched earth policy, which was later adopted by Stalin. All the food grains were destroyed. So when Napoleon had invaded Russia, he had not carried stocks of food with him. He had hoped that he would gather it from the countryside. So when the army reached Moscow, they were starving. He had expected that they would remain in Moscow during the summer. Temperature 0, -10, like that. What happened was even Moscow had been abandoned. So whenever Napoleon attacked or marched forwards, the Russians retreated. They did not fight him. They allowed him to enter Moscow. When Moscow was entered, they found it did not have even one small drop of water or grain. They had wells, but all the water, there was no rope or bucket to take out the water. And after Napoleon camped in Moscow, the Russians came back and set Moscow on fire. There was no water to set out the fire, and so Napoleon had to retreat. When he was expecting to rest in Moscow during winter, the temperature is falling, -11, -14, -13. When he reaches Smorgon, means he was actually on the field without food, without shelter. And you can see what happened. He started off with 4,22,000, 10,000 over here. Why I'm showing this? You have the entire campaign in one picture. You don't need anything else. See, even graphs can be made such informative. So you have to plan how to make even a bar graph more. Don't just give the figures. Try to add text to a graph and show and give the reader more information. Okay, so just plotting 40%, 50%, 60%, no, that's wrong. You can also add text to the graph, do add it, and see how it can be made more informative. A very good book on descriptive statistics is by John Tukey, 1977. It's a classic book, Exploratory Data Analysis. Look at this. I've tried to estimate a consumption model. Consumption as a function of income. I've used the entire data in estimating model 1. Do you think that the results of the first model is very good? This is the coefficient. This is the standard. This is sorry, just a minute. I've forgotten what this is. This is the t value. Do you think that model 1 is a good model? What is the problem with model 1? Statistically, nothing. It has both the values has got good t values. But what is wrong over here?
So it shows the negative relationship.
Yeah, what should be the actual relationship?
So it should be positive relationship. There should be.
Yeah, this is actually what I did was I had artificially created the data. Look at the data now. Look at the mean. Look at the maximum. See, what I did was after creating the data using a data generating model, I changed one value and made it huge. Okay, one income value was huge. So this outlier gave me resulted in a negative coefficient. In model 2, I've dropped that value, run it on one less observation, and now I've got good values. So be a bit careful. I mean, see what the command that I've run over here is simply summarize income. Okay. This is income, this is consumption. Summarize income, consumption. And just by looking at the range, I was able to identify what is wrong over here. So don't belittle your descriptive statistics. It's always better to do some exploration before embarking on your confirmatory analysis. Okay, so I still have some time before I finish. So, but I think that particularly Firoz will have to pack up. Firoz, are you going to office now? What is the situation?
Yes, I'm in office. The situation is not very good. It's very poor actually.
No, I mean, what is your, office? 50% attendance.
Yes, 50% attendance. But people are getting infected severely.
Yeah, সেটা তো কিছু করার নেই. Okay, so I think I'll end the lecture now because you had put a request earlier to end around 5:30.
কালকে ওরা ফ্রি থাকলে দেখো না তাহলে আমি একটা ক্লাস নিয়ে নেবো
আচ্ছা, বল জিজ্ঞেস করছি ওদের. So I'll end the lecture now. আচ্ছা, are you free on tomorrow? MD is asking.
No, sir, tomorrow we have 2 classes.
Tomorrow we have class, 2 classes.
দুটো ক্লাস আছে. কার কার আছে?
SB sir and
SB will not be able to take it, I think.
PT sir.
হ্যাঁ, SB পরীক্ষাও তো আছে. পরীক্ষাটা কবে?
ও তো বলছিল রিটেন নিয়ে নেবে
হ্যাঁ, বা নেব না বলছিল এরকম একটা কিছু. SB has COVID. Will he take the class? When is SB's class?
First 3:30.
3:30.
3:30 to 5.
And the second class, who is taking it?
PT sir.
PT sir.
PT.
পিটি উইল টেক দ্য ক্লাস
PT will take the class.
তাহলে ওদের একটু বলো এসবির সাথে জিজ্ঞাসা করে নিতে ইফ এসবি ডাজ নট টেক দ্য ক্লাস আমি ওটা নেব আর আমাকে একটু ইনফর্ম করো
Okay. So, will one of you please contact SB and ask him whether he's going to take the class or not? And
Yes.
if he doesn't take the class, then MD will take the class. Please inform her also. Whatever, whether even if SB takes it, inform her.
Okay sir. Will
If SB doesn't take, then she will take the class. And I will take the class in that case. What is 40? কি?
এক্ষুনি আর বেশি প্রমিস করো না যদি আমাদের নেগেটিভ আসে
হ্যাঁ
তাহলে কালকে বিকেলে করতে পারো
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ,
এটা একটা প্রবাবিলিটি ওরা
আমি আমারটা বলছি তো.
তা না হলে তুমি নিতে পারবে
আমি নিতে পারবো না, আমার তো ভাইবা আছে কাল পরশু. আচ্ছা, আর সেকেন্ড হচ্ছে তোমাদের নেক্সট টিউসডেটা কি বার গো, মানে কত তারিখ? আমার কাছে ক্যালেন্ডার নেই অ্যাকচুয়ালি.
স্যার 11
11th. আচ্ছা, টিউসডে আমি নিতে পারবো. সো আর টিউসডে আই ফিনিশ দিস লেকচার হোপফুলি.
sir, when will you send us the recordings?
Recordings, actually I don't send it.